Everybody ready? Okay. Good evening. It's 5:31. We'll begin this City Council special City Council meeting, a work session today. We convene in City Council chambers in work session regarding items for presentation and discussion on such issues that may require in-depth consideration by the City Council. First item on our agenda, number 1, is citizen comments. According to Lubbock City Council rules, any citizen wishing to appear in person before a regular meeting of the City Council regarding any matter posted on the City Council agenda below shall complete the sign-up form provided at the meeting no later than 5:30 p.m. on July 18, 2024. Citizen comments provide an opportunity for citizens to make comments and express a position on agenda items. And I believe we have 3 people today who have signed up to address us. First is Mr. Adam Hernandez. Adam, if you would come forward and state your name and your address, and you have 3 minutes to make your comments.
All right, good afternoon, Mayor, Council. I'm Adam Hernandez, live at 6966 26th Street, and I am the Communications Chair for Lubbock Compact. We feel that it's important to sort of put up some proposals during these times that might help the city out, and so that's what I'm here to do. I think that really this should be the basis of everything else we think about, whether it be animal services or aquatics or whatever, giving raises to firefighters or police. All of these things are going to hinge on how financially healthy our city is, right? So Lubbock should have a value per acre analysis conducted across the entire city so we can measure the efficiency of our land use. What this means in very basic terms is looking at how much it's costing the city to deliver services to communities across Lubbock and how much those same areas are producing in the form of property taxes, sales taxes, and other fees. In other words, it shows us in a very visual way what the financial health of our city is. Like many other cities, we've never done this math, and the expense is minimal when you consider the benefits of having this information versus not knowing. When a city does this, they usually find out that the city's wealth is coming from different areas than they thought, and that there are many opportunities for improving our overall economic productivity over time. Of course, economic productivity is how a city pays for things like road maintenance, police and firefighters, and other city services. Lubbock's issue, like other cities, is that there often isn't enough money to cover everything we'd like to or to make improvements in services when necessary. There are also relatively new developments in our city that are financially insolvent as soon as they're built, meaning we don't have the money required to cover the maintenance on all that new infrastructure when it comes due, usually about 20 years after it has been newly constructed. This is also not unique to Lubbock, so don't feel bad. Most cities in America are in a similar situation. That also means that we have real-world examples that we can look to where cities have taken what they learned in their value per acre analysis and used it to improve their city's financial health over time. Some of the things the city can use to turn this analysis into action items are Plan Lubbock 2040, zoning codes, building codes, tax abatements, and other incentives, and road design, among others. This analysis will make it possible for the city to become financially stronger and less reliant on debt over time. So we feel that this is a very important and worthy use of public funds that will make us better stewards of taxpayer dollars. We also propose that we do a follow-up value per acre analysis every 3 to 5 years so that we can see if the things we're trying are working or if we need to tweak our strategies. So that's all I got for this afternoon. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Hernandez. Next, we have Joshua Shankles.
Good afternoon, Council. Joshua Shankles. I live in the 2600 block of 47th Street, and I also serve on the board of Lubbock Compact and am one of its managing directors. And I have 2 things to bring before you today. I'll try to be very brief on them and send this along to your email for more details. The first is to recommend an investment in our urban forest in Lubbock. I think this is a very popular proposal. Everybody loves trees and loves a green city. But it needs to be an investment area for us. The replacement, maintenance, and expansion of our urban forests stands to have almost universal benefits to the place that we call home, both the environment that people enjoy and also wildlife. A green environment has been shown to be a benefit to human health, and this can protect our city against excessive wind and heat. Many people aren't aware that heat is the #1 weather-related cause of injury and death, and Lubbock is a very hot city, and so this would be protective of those elements. And further, it mitigates flooding risk and protects infrastructure investments that we've already made. Finally, I would say that we have the means to make this an even more robust investment because the West Texas A&M Forest Service Nursery is just right up the road, and it would be very easy to coordinate how to make that investment dollar go the farthest it can. So we're proposing that you make a $2 per capita investment in Lubbock's urban forest. Again, that's the maintenance, replacement, and expansion of it. I'd also like to take a moment to advise this council against adopting general austerity into our budget. We're not going to nickel and dime our way to a tax break for anybody. The truth is that no city can run away from its financial fundamentals, and those just kind of are what they are. Lubbock is going to bring in a certain amount of revenue, and it's going to cost a certain amount to run the city, and that's just kind of is what it is. Until we address the underlying fundamentals of how our city is developed and built, and those are things that we are taking steps on, it will cost about the same amount, and there's really no way to fundamentally change that. So we would advise against an austerity budget, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Shankles. And next is Bridget Krizak.
Good evening. My name is Bridget Krizak. I live at 3412 46th Street. I'm here to talk about the supplemental community development funds. Community development has a mission and purpose to promote self-sufficiency and economic opportunities and suitable living environments, including but not limited to decent, safe, sanitary, and affordable housing for low to moderate income individuals and families. Community development administers grant programs and direct payment programs for these individuals to provide for improving public infrastructure through unpaved roadway projects and construction of sidewalks, housing rehab, and funding to nonprofit agencies who provide public service, homeless support, and affordable housing. In contrast to this mission, the community development's revenue has decreased by $900,000 or 12.6% in the 23-24, and the department expenditures have decreased by 1.2%. Some of these decreases are related to reductions in grants. The other part is a decreased commitment on the part of the city and city council to support the mission of the department. During the discussion at the Ad Hoc Lateral Sewer Line Committee, it was noted that obtaining funds from the department is difficult and intrusive, and that not many people qualify, even though the median income in Lubbock is $58,000 per year. Council should reconsider and strengthen its commitment to community development by ensuring an adequate budget to sustain the mission for low and moderate income citizens, which in turn will help to maintain the city's infrastructure and make Lubbock a more livable city with fewer areas with blighted housing or lacking paved streets and safe walkable sidewalks. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Krizak. Now we'll move on to number 2 on our agenda for today. We will review and discuss the adopted Lubbock City Council priorities for fiscal year 2024-25 budget preparation. Topics may include planning, goals, and budget priorities for the Lubbock City Council and City of Lubbock, the programs, expenditures, and policies of the City Council and the City of Lubbock, including but not limited to the Lubbock City Charter, ARPA funding, annexation and growth, aquatics, substance abuse, municipal fees, transportation, infrastructure, solid waste, streets, the Gateway Fund, Civic Center, Lubbock Animal Services, libraries, community engagement, capital improvements, facilities, parks and recreation, development services, legislative agenda, public safety, public health, public safety infrastructure, code enforcement, staffing levels, and future needs. This discussion may include a wide range of topics related to the programs, operations, and policies of the City Council and the City of Lubbock. Action may be taken by the City Council to give direction to the City Manager in regard to determining the priorities and goals discussed. So with that, I will turn the meeting over to our city manager, Mr. Atkinson.
Thank you, Mayor, City Council. Good to see everybody on a Thursday evening. A little unusual for us, but we certainly do appreciate everybody being here. As the mayor noted, I think the primary focus for tonight, we have 4 brand-new members, so members that were not here when the priorities were prepared and adopted back in February. And then we, of course, have 3 that are returning who have been through this. We're very near the point now to where we take the total of our budgets and we start putting them together and finalizing those. We've had just under 50 department level reviews at this point, plus literally every existing and proposed capital project by division. We've gone through that. To get to this final point, of course, council, this all leads up to the week that you will have on August the 5th, beginning on August the 5th. If council has particular focus areas, priorities, if I can get those out tonight, so what I'm envisioning is we'll start likely with the mayor and then run through each member. If we can get those out tonight and gain consensus on those, if they're different than where we stand today, that will greatly assist us in getting a budget back in front of you on August the 5th. That's what you expect to see. So, Mayor, with that, I'll turn it back over, take any questions, and take notes.
Thank you, Mr. Atkinson. So, one thing I think is important, at least to me in this discussion, is that it actually be a real priority setting discussion. It's easy to talk about priorities over a wide range without actually prioritizing different areas, because priorities really mean making choices about what needs to have a priority over other areas. So we've identified a lot of areas, from public safety, public health, fiscal discipline, redevelopment, a lot of different areas, parks, libraries, where we want to see different things accomplished in our city. But I'd like the focus to also be on what is our number 1 or number 2 priority as we go through that process. Because when you set a budget, it really is about determining where the amount of money you have based on your tax rate and what you get from your taxpayers, where that money's to go and where it needs to go most importantly. So for me, public safety is the most important issue that we face. And we've identified a number of areas. Unfortunately, one of them in public safety has been accomplished very well, and that's the selection of a new police chief. And so we have accomplished one of the major things that we needed to accomplish as far as public safety is concerned. For me, the other areas to address with our police and public safety in that area is making sure that our police officers and our force is adequately staffed to meet the needs of our city, given our crime situation here. And I know that we had a presentation earlier this year showing that our crime rate from 2022 to 2023 had fallen, and in many areas that it had fallen. But I also think that it seems evident to me, and I think it's evident to a lot of other people, that through the course of this year, the first half of this year, particular areas of crime in this city, shootings, gang violence, and murders have increased, along with some terrible accidents on our city streets. So the key to addressing that really comes down to having an adequately staffed police force, and one that is paid well enough that we fill our vacant positions, and we can not only staff our patrol officers, but also the people who back them up, and also have enough officers to commit to our participation in the TAG program, where we cooperate with other agencies, particularly with relation to gang and drug violence. So that is my number 1 priority over all other priorities that we might set. I also believe that during the course of this year, because of some attacks by animals and just citizen comments, that the area of animal safety of our public from dog attacks and loose animals has become an area of increasing concern. So with public safety being my number one concern, I think we need to look very carefully at how we are addressing the problem of loose animals in the city, and make sure that our animal services are funded and staffed in order to deal with that problem and get a handle on that problem, which seems to be a growing and increasing problem in our city. So that's just the most important area to me. Beyond that, I think we've always been committed to our city's infrastructure. That's the backbone and key to everything that we do and the services we provide that our citizens depend on day in and day out. Utilities, water, and so I think we've had a very good program of increasing our commitment and our budget to street maintenance over the years. And so that would be my number two priority, is making sure that we find a way to continue to increase the amount of money that we put in our budget to provide for street maintenance and other infrastructure issues. Recently, Odessa has experienced horrible problems with their water system failure, and that infrastructure has become a very bad problem for them, and has caused many of their citizens to be without any water for days on end. We obviously don't want that to happen in our city, so I'm sure you are doing a good analysis of where our infrastructure for delivery of water is, but we want to make sure that that is taken care of, because that's absolutely critical. Our lives depend on water, even more than electricity, I believe. So that would be my second area, or it may be third after, if I include animal services under public safety as a separate idea. And then the other priority for me is just making sure that we don't increase the tax burden on the average citizen. And that's why priorities are so important in this whole discussion. I recently read that the burden on homeowners is at the highest level for home ownership, which includes mortgages, insurance, property taxes, is at the highest level since 1984. I don't believe we can continue to put on our citizens, or at least our average citizen, a heavier tax burden until that situation is changed. And so that would be my other priority, is making sure that we come up with a budget that doesn't increase the burden on our taxpayers. Those are my most important areas, and with that, I'll pass it off to other city council persons. Anybody want to address it first? We can start with you, Mr. Harris. Okay, Mr. Glasheen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with Mayor McBraier's sentiment on public safety, and really my top three priorities are public safety, infrastructure, and supporting economic growth. I agree with Mayor McBraier's priorities in public safety. I won't restate that, but I think it's important that we fully support the public safety departments and give them all the tools that they need to accomplish their mission. When it comes to infrastructure, I would like to see the city be proactive in looking at our future needs. I think that the staff has done a good job with long-term planning. We need to follow through on that. We also need to budget so that we can completely meet all of our current maintenance needs in our established neighborhoods. And a strength of the city's staff has been planning for our long-term needs, for example, with the Lake 7 water infrastructure expansion. So I think it's very important that we continue to support Lubbock's long-term water supply with that sort of planning. I believe that economic growth will follow where we have provided public safety and infrastructure and otherwise a pro-business, low-tax environment. That's the best formula for supporting economic growth. And so I would like to see significant cost controls in spending outside of those priorities, and also spending that's not evidence-based to efficiently support one of those priorities. And I think that our staff and the departments are best equipped to find those types of efficiencies. You know, just a couple observations that I would look at skeptically in the budget cycle is the use of outside consultants. kind of unnecessary spending like, catered lunches, the grant programs that are transfers of wealth more than supporting a public safety or infrastructure priority, or other forms of government intervention in a competitive marketplace. And with the budget cycle, I'd also like to make sure that the cost of an activity is being closely tied to the real cost of the city to provide that service or perform that activity. And ideally, the cost should be carried by the person that benefits or incurs the need for that type of spending. So if we're going to have a fee to establish a connection to a water line, for example, it needs to efficiently match the actual cost to the city and not have that activity subsidized by other taxpayers. And I'll emphasize that our very best way for us to reduce taxes is to reduce spending. And so we must be extremely disciplined in our spending. It's appropriate for the city to even be austere in our budgeting process, because this is not our money, it's the taxpayers' money, and it's part of our duty as public servants to find every dollar, every nickel and dime that we can save for the taxpayers.
Thank you, Mr. Glasheen. Mayor Pro Tem Martinez Garcia.
Go first, since we've already done our priority for this budget in February. I think that would be, and then I will give my input.
Okay, I'm fine with that. Okay. Councilman Rose.
Well, thank you, Mayor, for laying out your priorities. I think all of us up here pretty well agree on most of those priorities. I think one thing that I want to make sure we do is continue to try to grow this city economically, and that includes downtown. With the grants and things like that, I mean, we're looking at spending money to make money, basically. I mean, you're looking at like Leprino coming in and things like that. I think those are extremely important, and they don't all have to be big business, but small business as well. I think that'll be one of my biggest priorities. Obviously, we've got public safety and infrastructure that are key, and I know we've done a really good job on water. But I believe that you can get behind on that before you know it. And I completely agree with you on staying ahead of that in terms of infrastructure. Thank you.
And let me just say, the way we'll handle this meeting is you don't just get one shot. So we will come back around. I mean, you started with your, and this is an interactive discussion between us.
Sure.
And some of us have been here longer than others. And so, we want to make sure that this process allows you to develop your ideas, not only as you state them the first time, but in reaction or response to what the rest of us may say. So, we're not here for just a one shot and get it all out there. But we want to take the time necessary here today for us to react with one another and respond to one another, because we work as a council and we will make these decisions as a council. And as our city manager said, he would like to walk away today with a sense of what we want him to do. So I want us to be here long enough that he can walk away with some sense of where we want him to go. So with that, I'll move to you, Councilman Collins.
Thank you, Mayor. I think that as we look at public safety and the entities engaged in that, I think it is very important that we remain competitive or regain a competitive advantage in the region for ensuring that we attract the best people to work for our community in terms of fire, and police, animal services. And what that really amounts to in my mind is ensuring that we are competitive in salary and benefit, and creating a good work environment across the board, whether it just be in public safety or the rest of our city staff. What I've learned in our very short time here is that we have a lot of responsibilities within our city, and having the very best people possible to handle those responsibilities helps create good outcomes for all of our citizens. So I'd want to make sure that we're trying to be as competitive as possible across the board. Infrastructure needs are going to be obvious, and we spend a great deal of time on what's right in front of us. And of course, we spent a good deal of time last week talking about the sewer and alleyway issues, and those are important, but I also want to ensure that we're thinking down the road. What are we doing 10, 15, 20 years from now when we're no longer sitting here, but are we ensuring that our future citizens, our young citizens of Lubbock are well situated? Have we prepared for them? And I think that's very important, and I think that's going to be a part of the things that I want to focus on, is ensuring that we are well prepared for future. And that includes both the maintenance of our existing infrastructure and the growth that we will undoubtedly experience, and we've experienced in our lifetimes here. Economic growth is very important. I think that economic growth is the answer to having and maintaining a lower property tax rate. If we can ensure that new properties are coming online, new businesses are coming online, new sales taxes are being generated, then we can help keep our property tax portion of the city revenue down. And so it's important that we look at that and how it impacts the overall budget. And so I want to make sure that we're thoughtful about how we do that. And we do need to be thoughtful about it. It can't just, it needs to be planned. It needs to have a mission and a control structure around it to ensure that we're doing the things that we want to do and that we are getting the best value for the efforts that we make. That's a limited budget item, and it's controlled by sales tax revenue to some extent, and so we need to make sure that we're doing the things that are going to make the best use of those monies, and I think that for the most part we're doing that today. And then fiscal discipline, and I think fiscal discipline is very important as we talk about ensuring that we can keep our tax rates low, but that we are also using our revenues and expenditures wisely. And that goes back to what you said, that we're being careful about and thoughtful about how we create this budget and ensure that we're using these funds to their best, in their best places. And everyone's going to have an opinion about what the best place is. And so we have to recognize that some things that we or I might not think important are very, very important to other parts of our community. And so we have to be very open-minded about what we look at and what we decide as we set these priorities, the things that maybe we set aside. I haven't been in a swimming pool, and I can't tell you how long, but I can assure you there are people in our community that are anxious about not having a swimming pool to use. And so we have to be thoughtful of that. I don't know that we have a solution, but we certainly have to keep that in mind as we look at this budget going forward. So, and if I get another bite at the apple in a little while, we'll talk about it some more. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. Okay, now I'll return to you, Mayor Pro Tem. Well, okay, this is like a pass, okay? All right. Come back to you if you come up.
To say I didn't know I didn't know anything about the last meeting or anything, but I was just wanting to make the comment that I'm pretty much in agreement with everything you were saying, which we could add without more tax monies, but look more at some grants and stuff for economic development. That's a little suggestion that I would like to add to the itinerary as far as, getting some grant situated so we can get some more business owners and things like that, and getting them educated and things like that to help this city be a better place. So I just had that comment that I would like to say. That was it.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. We'll make another round again, too.
Okay.
Okay. Councilman Basheen, you got another comment.
Thank you. One thing I didn't mention is that I think that our neighborhood parks are an important part of the city infrastructure. And so the parks need to be fully maintained And also, I think it's appropriate to take a look at our parks and see where we can make investments in planting new trees and make sure that especially our existing parks are going to be well-positioned to continue to provide the similar experience that we're enjoying today, but 50 years from now as trees are getting older, especially in our established neighborhoods.
Thank you, Mr. Glasheen. Okay, Councilwoman Dr. Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor. So as I'm kind of sitting here listening to everybody's priorities, it really appears to me that most of these priorities fall in our current priorities list, which I very much appreciate, which means hopefully we weren't doing a terrible job before we got these amazing 4 new members. I think a lot of the people up here are very like-minded, that nobody wants a super high property tax rate. We all don't want to be taxed to death. We all want to make sure our city grows and develops appropriately and stimulate the economy with growth and development and make sure our citizens are safe. I think all of that is very well explained in our current priorities, and I'm glad to see that. I'm glad to hear that a lot of us are on the very same page on what we want to see moving forward. I don't have a lot to add because I think, a job of a city council person here in Lubbock is not to have pet projects, but to provide core services to all of our citizens, and that includes public safety and growing our infrastructure and fiscal discipline, that we use their money to the best of its ability to provide all of that to them. I do appreciate Councilman Collins' comment that we have to consider everybody. Our political beliefs and what we think is important doesn't account to what everybody thinks is important. And so that's what we do, is we represent everybody to listen, but sometimes we don't always agree. And sometimes we just have to agree to disagree. And that's absolutely okay. As long as we are protecting the growth of our city and protecting our citizens, that is the way we move forward. So for me, I mean, my priorities still stand, and it appears that it stands for everybody, that we continue to provide public safety. We continue to do it in a disciplined way and manage our money, and we provide the opportunities for growth and development in our city and economic development to continue to increase the revenue that we have to provide the services that everybody wants. And that's how you do it, is you get people to come, you get businesses to grow, so you increase that revenue. And so with that, I am very happy with these priorities. I'm so happy to have all of these new members on this council, because that sounds like we are all in agreement that we are going to be able to move forward and do great things with this city. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson. And now the ball's back in your court, Mayor Pro Tem.
And it was important for me to let these folks speak, because as they're navigating through the process and the system, I think we need to listen to their thoughts. And I agree with Dr. Wilson that they're very much in line with us. But it's also very important that we are respectful of our staff that has invested. I think, Mr. Atkinson, you said that you guys have already had 50 meetings. Is that correct?
Just under that, yes.
Not to mention all the other time, the hours that the staff has already put in. So I think it's important for us as a council to recognize that these folks have invested quite a bit of time, and we need to stay on track. I think, as mentioned, we definitely are very committed to making sure that we are good stewards of our citizens' tax dollars. That's what it's all about. But we also, in thinking that, we have to make sure that we also utilize the staff the way that they're supposed to be. We're policymakers, they're budget designers, and they've done a wonderful job, and I commend our city manager for doing that. And I think, the decisions that we make today, or not today, but on this budget, will definitely impact and for the next 10 to 15 years and down the road, because if we adjust too much, it will impact whatever's already been designed. And we don't want to disrupt the process that it will hurt us. So if looking at the future, I just ask all of my fellow colleagues to just be patient and give our staff the respect of what they've been working on, and all of our employees, because let me tell you that when we talk about public safety, all of our citizens, employees that is, no matter the department, have contributed to making sure that this is a safe facility, that all of our buildings are safe, and that their safety is also accounted for. So it's just really important for me to do that. And I know y'all mentioned grants. Grants are wonderful, and we love when we get them, but they take time. And as someone that has written grants multiple times, it is not like I write a grant today and I'm going to get it tomorrow. It takes time. So that is why the city manager's role and his staff, our staff, plays such a significant role in how we follow this process. So no doubt, I want to see all of our staff to be, valued for what they have contributed, and that we do that across the board. And I'm so glad to hear that y'all are about parks and quality of life, because as I've mentioned, and as many of you know, that is a very important priority for me as well. I want to see swimming pools. I want to make sure that our libraries are well-maintained and given everything. And as far as trees, one thing that I'm glad to hear trees are the conversation as I'm looking out the window and seeing all the trees. But City of Lubbock has been recognized as, I think it's Tree USA, is that? Tree City USA, because we are doing well with that. But we do probably need to maintain them a little bit more, but we don't have the staff. So that's one of the issues. Something else that I want to mention, just because I heard some conversation about animal services. And this, again, is where, our staff is our subject matter experts. And I have personally gone and worked with Lubbock Animal Services to make sure that we work on an ordinance. And I think it's already been returned to Jared, and you're reviewing it. And hopefully that's something that will be brought up in the next few months, or sooner than that. But again, it's just important that we allow these folks to continue to do the work. And I appreciate hearing that we are all pretty much on the same page. That's going to simplify this process even more so. So I'm glad to have all these council members. I'm glad to have these perspectives, and I'm glad to know that we're all working pretty much on the same direction. So thank you for that, guys and girl. But again, thank you for the time, and I look forward to more input as we process all of this.
Okay. Does anybody have any additional run through? I've got a few comments, and I'll direct a few comments to some of you. And again, I want this to be a back and forth discussion, because I don't think we can actually come to much of a consensus unless we really do sort of vet this out between us. So that, and again, talking about respect for our staff, respect for Jarrett and the huge job he has ahead of him. He has said several times he wants to walk away from today with a pretty clear idea of where we want him to go. And so out of respect for him and our staff, I want him to have that when he leaves here today. So I don't want to cut this short. We'll be here as long as we need to. But Mayor Pro Tem, I heard you mention swimming pools in the plural. So is one of your priorities that we have in our budget for this year a program, a decision by this council to rebuild pools, or is it just one pool, or what are you talking about there?
So on the pools, I think we already made a decision to Band-Aid the Clap Park, so we're going to do that. And I think that's already in the works. Is that not right, Jarrett?
Thank you. Believe my recollection of that is staff was bringing you the Band-Aid approach back as part of next year's budget. So that's something that you would see, and then council can determine amongst itself if that's a good or wise use of those dollars.
Well, the other part is that moving forward, no doubt we are going to have to do a quality of life bond, but not this year. I think right now our focus, and I was glad to hear the concern and interest of roads, because there's no question, as the city continues to grow, we need to make sure that we're sustaining and maintaining our infrastructure. But as far as this year, quality of life, it is, something that I hope that you guys will support in the future and the near future, but not in this bond, not in this particular budget, because for the most part, I think the budget has already been designed. And I know we can have some tweaks, and we will, but until it's fully presented to us, I don't think this year would be the year to, or the budget to adding a pool, just going along with what has already been determined in a few council meetings back.
So, Mr. Atkinson, if I understand correctly, the amount that was presented to us earlier this year, I think around 322,000 as the Band-Aid, was that what it was?
I think it was a 400 and,
Yeah, when all of the associated parts, it gets closer to 400.
Okay, but that is in the proposed, or the budget you're working on, that has been
It will
included
be,
in that?
it will be a capital proposal
Okay.
for the council to consider. That was how we had left that.
Okay, and so at this point, that's all, unless somebody wants to chime in, as far as pools are concerned, that's all we're looking at for a budget item for our pool this year, is to try to get CLAP back up and operational by next summer.
and I believe we're already working on that. Brooke, is that right? Aren't they already working on that? Or are we not?
Right now, there is no work going on at CLAP
Until
Pool. We've
that-
got to have, if the
We've gotta
council
have the
chooses
approval.
to do that, we have to have the council approval, and
Of a budget
that's
that
coming in the
includes
budget,
that.
yes.
Okay.
Okay,
It's not in the current budget.
right.
Gotcha. Thank you, Brooke.
But we want to make sure it's, yes, and with this budget, it will get started and completed hopefully by next summer. Is that
That
at
is-
least
yeah,
a timeline
That is
enough?
the timeline.
Okay, all right. I want the public that's expressed a lot of concern about that, at least to know that that is what, and unless anybody disagrees with that, that's what we want to see in our budget for this year. Yes, Mr. Rose?
What is our, the lifespan after spending that money of the pool estimated? Do we know that?
We do not. Thank you for asking that question. We have a high level of confidence that the repairs will get that pool back open. We do. My concern, and was going to tell you the week of the 5th, but I'll tell you now, my concern with that, you still have a 70-plus-year-old pool shell. And the unique thing about the way Lubbock's pools, and remember, they were all built with bonded funds way back. They were all built in two pieces, so the shell of the pool is not monolithic. It actually has a joint in it. It is a point of failure. It's not what shut the pool down, but it is a point of failure. The 400,000, we'll just call it that in a round number, it will help with that, but I want to be really clear, even the engineering professionals who are helping us figure this out, we don't have a way to tell you that that's a 1, 3, 5, 10-year improvement. And if I recall back to when we first had this discussion, that's why we wanted to bring it up in budget and set it on the table by itself.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
So my question to other council members, is there any appetite among other council members to do more than that on pools in this budget year ahead? Anyone? Mr. Glasheen.
Thank you. I worked at Clap Pool 20 years ago as a lifeguard, and 20 years ago, the equipment was broken down and the pool was leaking, and I don't think it got any better over the last 20 years. A concern that I would have is a Band-Aid solution, and we haven't studied this as a council yet. We haven't been presented with the plan yet, though, is that it'd be a bit like putting a new engine and a new transmission in a beat-up old car, that we might be better off spending that money in a different way. So that would be a reservation that I have, just hearing about the concept of a Band-Aid solution. Otherwise, I think that it would be difficult to include discretionary spending in this budget cycle on projects to get accomplished the next year.
Thank you, Mr. Glasheen. Anybody else want to have any input on the pool issue? Yes, Dr. Wilson.
So I agree with Mr. Glasheen. I mean, the budget, we're 2 weeks away from our presentations, and to try to sit up here and nitpick through projects to try to add into a budget that our staff and all of these departments have been working on since January, February is just, it's just inconceivable to try to send our staff back to change all their budgets, to try to find money to build swimming pools. And I believe I remember correctly that Colby, back when we talked about pools, saying to build what we have, like an equivalent, is $8 to $10 million per swimming pool or more. And if you think about things like an aquatic center, that's 50 to 100 million, depending on how you build it. Now, everyone up here just sat up here and said, we believe in fiscal discipline. How on earth in 2 weeks are we going to come up with anywhere from $8 to $100 million with swimming pools? I don't think anybody up on this council hates swimming pools or hates children and hates quality of life projects for the city of Lubbock. That is not what anybody's saying. And I heard, I think Christy said it, that this may have to go on to a potential bond election to where the citizens of this city can decide, do you want to pay more in tax to have these wonderful, very expensive quality of life projects? I would love to see a city swimming pool. I would love to. But in these budgets that we have, we do not have the revenue coming in to just go out and build a $10 million swimming pool. So I'm absolutely 100% opposed to putting any kind of money towards a brand new swimming pool in this budget because it's not there. It's not because I don't want it. It's just, it's not there. And if we don't want to increase anybody's taxes, you can't have projects like that in a budget.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson. Mayor Pro Tem?
And once again, you know, quality of life, we've already heard the public's input. They've said, we want pools. But just like pools in the past, they had to be funded with quality of life. You know, bonds, and this is not the time. You know, right now we are temporarily fixing it or alleviating the issue with our splash pads. And I think everyone who was against it has really enjoyed it. They're loving them. But meanwhile, I never like to put Band-Aids on things. I love to have new things, but this is not the time. I know when I might put my own family on a budget, and especially in a time where I think folks are having a difficult time, now's not the time to build pools, but we will later. And temporarily, I think it's good for us to fix it. But like Dr. Wilson said, in 2 weeks, how can we expect our staff to go back when they've already made so many cuts? And we just cannot. In 2 weeks, we can't do that. We need to respect the staff, our city manager, let them continue to do their due diligence. Let us all get this particular budget presented to us, and then, you know, we can look at some of the things, but now is not the time. It's just too much pressure for these folks. And, you know, when I'm preparing for something, it takes me that many months to prepare. And in 2 weeks, I think it just, you know, the citizens expect us, and that's why we have this process. They expect us to have something ready when it's time. And it does not need to be delayed. I know that Cheryl is here, and I know how much time that you have invested in this, Cheryl. You've been doing this for a number of years, and I appreciate your expertise, and I think it would just be a slap in the face to our staff to make them change everything in 2 weeks. So I say let's give them a chance, and then we can go and decipher the budget a little bit more once it's presented to us.
Okay. Let me return to the issue of parks that Councilman Glasheen raised, and just have a little back and forth among the council members on parks. And so I agree with him. It's of all the quality of life issues that a city might provide, and this is a lower priority than your public safety and your infrastructure. But when you come down to looking at those quality of life issues, I think parks are probably one of the biggest assets that our city has. And they are an area in which our citizens are able to congregate, enjoy themselves, meet other citizens, other neighbors, almost any day of the year at no charge. So these are some of the assets, quality of life assets that our city provides that are provided to the widest number of our citizens at the lowest cost to our citizens. I don't know that I can say that it's the lowest cost to the city budget, but I don't know that it is an unreasonable part of our budget to maintain our parks. And so, I agree with Mr. Glasheen that parks are probably one of the higher priorities in the quality of life area for me, because they are available to the widest number of citizens. And now that we have put splash pads in 4 of them, and I drove by one the other day, 3, yeah, keep wanting to say 4. We had a 4th pool, but we have 3 splash pads and an unused pool right at the moment. But it was used by all ages. I mean, I was really surprised. I expected to just see moms with little kids out there, but there were teenagers out there enjoying it too. A lot of people at no charge to them. And the city didn't have to provide lifeguards, and we didn't have to do a whole lot of maintenance. We didn't have to police the activities. The parents were there to police their own kids. So this is one of those quality of life issues that really does meet the needs of a community in a way that, in the best possible way, I think. So for me, when you get down below my real priorities, my 1 and 2 and 3 priorities, this would be probably, of the quality of life issues, my highest priority amongst them. And so I open it up to the floor to anybody else to make comments about that or anything else now. Did you? I don't know why it's not showing up on my screen here, but yes, Mr. Collins.
Well, maybe I'm broken down here. I don't know. I want to circle back just for a point of clarity right quick in regard to pools in the upcoming budget, to make sure I understand what I think I'm hearing. Staff is preparing approximately $400,000 capital expenditure as a budget item for us to consider in this upcoming budget hearing and to place on the budget. In the event that that was put on the budget and we hear from staff or hear from their panel of experts that tell us that this fix isn't going to work, or vice versa, we feel like this fix has a 5-year to 7-year lifespan, and council decides on whether or not $400,000 for 5 to 7 years is a worthwhile expenditure, we have the option, if it's on the budget, to retract it. If we get a bad result or a bad report or recommendation that says, no, this is not a good expenditure, then we don't have to spend that money. Is that correct?
That is, and truly, and this is just more of a walking back educational piece of it, when it comes to your capital projects, remember, general rule, capital will always be a one-time expense for one-time money. Capital's not in the operating budget till it's finished, and then we take over what we need to do to maintain and to operate it. So if the council approves a capital project in the budget, that is an authorization for us to start through those steps and get ready. Sometimes that's engineering, sometimes it's acquiring right-of-way, just whatever that might be to do that. Council always has a second bite at every project. And that second bite is we've now taken it to bid, and those bids come back for award. So even though the money was set aside, it was authorized for that use, it never leaves until council approves on that second time. Most of the time, that's a construction project. Not every time, but most of the time. So back to the pool, and I don't want to belabor the point. The engineering work for this fix has been done. It's done by a local firm, a lot of familiarity. We tried to do it in-house. It wasn't in the wheelhouse, so to speak. It will open the pool. There will not be anybody that is going to come back and provide a level of certainty that it's 5 years, 7 years, 10 years. We're working, fixing the mechanicals we can absolutely do. We know that. There'll be good mechanicals and they'll work. Mechanicals in those existing shells have been replaced numerous times over their 70-plus years of use. That part will work. We're still going to have a two-part 70-plus-year-old shell, and there is not going to be, I've asked many times, no engineer is going to tell me that that's 6 years. It's just not going to happen.
So at some point, we'll have to make a determination of cost per year or cost per anticipated year to determine whether we think that's a good idea. But what I guess, again, as the new guy, it's going to go on the budget, and we're going to get to decide whether we want to continue with that at some point after the budget is set.
That is correct.
Okay, so that kind of helps me to understand that. And as we think about parks and pools, and a lot of this quality of life infrastructure, libraries, et cetera, I think that it's very important that we also ensure that we're considering not only the new, not only the repairs, but just the general maintenance of these facilities. And I think that while we would never have been able to maintain past a two-part swimming pool, we do need to ensure that we're doing a good job providing adequate staff, adequate budget to ensure that the maintenance of these facilities is as best as it can be. And I think about ballparks, I think about soccer fields, swimming pools, splash pads. We've got these brand new splash pads, and they're great. And in a couple of years, they're going to start costing us money. They're going to need repairs. They're going to need maintenance. And we have to ensure that we're preparing for that maintenance just as much as we were prepared to expend these capital dollars on the front side. And I want to make sure that we're not short-sighting or short-sheeting, the maintenance budgets that come along with these things as we build them. It's great to build them, but we also need to have in the back of our heads that they're going to cost us money at some point again in the future, and it's important that we are prepared for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. Yes, the more things we build, the more things we have to maintain. So you've got your capital outlay to build them, and then you've got your maintenance budget to operate them. And again, that's where we have to give careful consideration to how far out we extend ourselves, because at some point you have to maintain these things, and the maintenance costs increase, and they can begin to eat up a budget in ways you don't really expect or want, and can compete with other areas that are absolute priorities in a budget. All right. Again, the floor is still open. Okay. There you go.
Thank you, Mayor. As we are looking at parks in the future, I do want to encourage you all to, because I love hearing the support for our parks, and I just want to make sure that as I would love to show you some photos of the damage that the prairie dogs are doing to a lot of our parks, our lake system. And, as we're talking about quality of life, which I love that you guys are so in support of, thank you for that, because quality of life, as we experienced during COVID, became a very significant issue. And then even today at a conference that I attended, I was able to see that the average age, or the age that is growing in our city, is the 25, 40-year-old age, and they love their parks, and they love their quality of life. And as a former, person that sat on the Parks Board and was very committed to them, I look forward to the future. But again, I think that's also a future bond election. And just like former pools and community centers, but we got to, when we prepare for that, we've got to think of them a little bit more prepared and smart, and what's happening in our time. People have different needs. They want to go to the library, and which are so highly used, but we need to make it even more appealing at a low cost price. So, but once again, just like we brought libraries in the past and swimming pools and community centers that were all done by bond election, again, for the future. But right now, unless anybody has a crystal ball, which I know none of you do, because I don't even have one. And I think let's just give staff their opportunity to present us the budget that they've worked so diligently for the last February, March, how many months has it been? 7 months already? So let's wait until the budget meetings and they'll start bringing us books. We're not just going to have these sheets like what we have right now. We will have very thick books that we all get to decipher. And, but it's exciting to hear and see that y'all are so committed to a lot of the things that I feel like we have done in the past. And also for our staff to see the type of commitment that we're making to make sure that they get the raises that they deserve as well. So I'm looking forward to hearing what is going to come in the future.
Mr. Rose.
So I just want to go back to parks, and we're talking about quality of life things right now, which I think is the thing that we get the biggest complaint on for, at least is what I hear from people. And don't get me wrong, District 4 is lacking in parks. I think probably has the least. So I would love to build as many parks as possible, but I think is what we're going to find out is, we're when people feel inflation, we all individually feel that, but the city is feeling that too. I mean, roads have what, doubled maybe to build, if not more.
But they've more than doubled. So
Right.
I'll give you a round number based on our second most recent project. Roadways are now $4 million per lane mile. So a 5-lane roadway is approximately $20 million for a mile.
So we're fighting inflation. We're fighting a city that's growing faster than we can keep up. And I just think is what we're going to find is that, we're talking about, we need to raise, give me some help here. Salaries for your city workers. We need to raise salaries for all our public safety workers. I'm with it, but I agree with Christy that it's not something. I think we need to slow down a little bit and see what the next few years bring in terms of this. Because go back to Councilman Collins' point is the more of these things you build, the more you have to take care of them. So that's where I am on quality of life things. Gosh, I wish we could build 6 pools around town, but it's not there right now. Thank you.
Mr. Harris.
Yes, Mayor, this question is for Mr. Atkins over there. Do we have to, Mr. Atkins, I'm sorry. Does it have to be like a bond election, or is it a council election to get rid of these prairie dogs in Lubbock, Texas? What's the answer to that?
It does not have to be either. There are certain regulatory challenges that make that more difficult. And if you don't mind, I would probably offer an opportunity for you to visit with myself and Mr. Van Gundy. We're literally to the point of buying $10,000 cameras used hole by hole as we attempt just to protect the places where the kids play.
Right.
So it's not so much a money issue.
Okay.
Does not require it, and we'd be glad to get you caught up on all of that.
Okay. Thank you.
In order to address a couple of other issues that have been raised, and I hear what you're saying, Mayor Pro Tem, about wait to hear from our staff, but our staff have come to us today to hear from us as they're going through this process, and they want to hear from us today. So I think it's important that we let them know they want to walk away with a consensus from us, and they want to have that before they actually present the budget to us. So I think that's why we're here today. And so this question is addressed to you, Mr. Atkinson. In the budget, as you're working through it, what do you anticipate as far as our staffing levels across all departments? Have you gotten that far? I'm sure you have gotten that far into it. As to where our staffing levels, our number of employees will be. Are we going to be needing to add a net number of new employees in this budget that you are putting forward for us? And do you know what that number is?
We've not finished approving the request for additional staffing. Really, I've held off on quite a few of the finish-up items pending tonight. My anticipation, by the time we take out positions, which we've done every year, by the time we take out positions that either cannot be filled or it's just not a necessary service at this time, I think you will see a request for a net increase. I don't think it's going to be very large. The two biggest public safety departments have got good and valid requests, and in fact, I believe that matches a lot of the discussion, that we've heard today. Would just throw this out maybe to facilitate additional discussion. Recall that we've reduced staffing in the Parks Department. We permanently eliminated positions when the year that we were able to do the no new revenue tax rate. And then in the current year's budget, remember, we took out, it's either 7 or 8, I think 7, full-time positions, eliminated them. We did maintain the dollar value, and we turned those into part-time employees. It was just, we were having trouble. We needed people in the parks. That's been very successful. I actually have other departments now wanting to try that same model. That'll show as a reduced FTE. It's not necessarily, you save the value of benefits, which is significant, you do. You're still spending the salary dollar that goes with it. Still, you've got to get the work done.
Anybody have any comments they want to add on that particular issue? Mayor Pro Tem.
We do have some deficiencies. I heard about, parks, and they still, while they've been very creative in doing the part-time jobs, which I applaud that department for working and really pushing that, and it's been very successful. But they do have deficiencies that, are limiting them. The bottom line is they need more staff folks so that, these trees that we want to be trimmed and the prairie dog issues that we're having and that the problem is growing, it's going to take more staff. But the other departments, Animal Services, had a very significant deficiency in the number of employees. We have a lot of departments, but I do applaud the staff for trying to be creative and wanting to get on board for now, because, sometimes you got to tighten the budget a little bit when you are experiencing the type of issues that we're having with inflation and whatnot. So that has made it challenging, but, I appreciate that everyone has really gone above and beyond to help to fix that issue. And I look forward to seeing how that is going to be addressed in the upcoming budget.
So my next question, Dr. Wilson, I see.
So I may be being a bit of a negative Nancy here, but I'm trying to figure out why we as a council are discussing staffing positions. That is the city manager's job. That is not our job as a council to determine what departments need staffing. That is up to each department head to sit with the city manager to decide what is best for that department. It is our job to look at the budget to find funding for that or to not fund that. But to sit up here and discuss each staffing position for each department doesn't make a lot of sense to me. That's just not our job.
To that, I would just comment that we're not discussing positions to eliminate. The question was just a general sense of where our staffing levels would be. And that is an issue that does impact the budget. So I think it's a perfectly valid point for us to be discussing here today. My next question, and again, some people may think this is not appropriate, but I'm going to ask it because I think it is. In your proposed budget, what sort of a increase in salaries, an inflationary increase, are you proposing, Mr. Atkinson?
We do not have that number in there at this point. That is absolutely one of the last things that gets plugged into a budget. It's based on an ability to pay.
Thank you. Mr. Glasheen.
We haven't discussed specific spending targets yet, but I would like to see a budget that comes in at or below the no new revenue rate. I think especially the consensus I hear from citizens is that current property taxes are too high, unsustainably high, and in an environment where appraisals continue to go up, I think that the no new revenue rate is a useful benchmark for us to evaluate the burden that we're placing on taxpayers.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for that. Could let me kind of expand on that a bit. Obviously, that is a benchmark that is used. By definition, and this is more council's aware, but more for those that may be listening, the no new revenue rate zeroes out appraisal growth. That's the purpose of that. Council, is there any interest in also using, so in addition to another benchmark that's common, is population plus inflation. So the growth in population plus inflation as a percentage compared to also your revenue and your expense. I'll throw that out as a question.
And that's a great question. Let's have a full discussion of that issue. My question back to you, Mr. Atkinson, is it possible for you to present a budget to us with both those scenarios so we can look at them and compare them? In a top line, very broad.
In a top line format, yes.
Yeah, I'm not
Yes,
talking
that
about
can be
details.
done. For the last number of years, if you take out the ARPA dollars, the change in the city's budget has been less, in some cases significantly less, than population plus inflation. What we've heard on priorities tonight, what I've heard on priorities tonight has been very, very helpful. And again, a tremendous amount of commonality, and I think, as was noted, matches pretty well to what we've had in those prior priorities. So certainly appreciate Councilman Glasheen kind of shifting over to the revenue side. So we've kind of gotten to that point that I spend most of the month of July in, and that is that there's always the natural tension anytime you budget. There has to be. A lot of the items that we have discussed today, certainly the ones that we have what I feel to be unanimous direction on, at their core, they're people-based services. That is the same for the police department, for the fire department, for animal services. We've talked quite a bit, and it really makes me extremely happy. Current maintenance and the ability to handle it in the future. Those are predominantly people-based. As your city grows, there is a limit to how far you can stretch that existing workforce. We added police officers this year. We added fire this year, a larger number of fire, but it's a different basis for how you calculate those. That is your largest expense, especially if we stay just in the general fund, which is where public safety, which is where street maintenance, which is where quality of life. That all lives in the general fund. The general fund has two primary sources of revenue. It has sales tax and it has property tax, your fees and other things that go with that. But that's going to be your lion's share. Lubbock, your sales tax revenue, whether you look at it in total or on a per capita basis, your sales tax revenue is larger than the revenue from the property tax. So the things I've heard today about economic development, economic growth, 100%. That is our top line number one revenue, and supporting that should continue to be, what we do. That's how we help fund these other things while either reducing or minimizing the hit from the property tax. So at a top line, can I put both those numbers together? Sure, I think we can. Preparing two completely different budgets in order to meet those. And again, you're talking about just the general fund. I don't think that's something that we can pull off in this period of time. Some other things I might toss out also just for discussion. And one of these that's been bouncing in my mind for a year. Those of you that were here in the last budget will remember a very confusing bar chart that I put out that was 2 stacked bars compared to each other. And just as I'm seeing now, every time I've tried to explain that, I've had that same look. And I tried it with our association of CPAs here in Lubbock. Too much data. But I want to go back, and I'll bring this forward when we do the budget. We talk about tax rate, tax rate, tax rate. I think, and I'm a taxpayer, and everybody at this dais is a taxpayer. I think we need to shift that and talk about what it means. And what a tax rate means is we're going to take a certain amount of money from people. It's how government works. It's its inherent nature. The rate in and of itself, even the no new revenue rate, is a backwards calculation. It is a revenue number, and then you algebraically adjust to get a tax rate. So is the tax rate high? Is it low? Is it right in the middle? I'll suggest to you that that's not the relevant number. It's how much money we have to take from our public in order to provide those services. So one of the things we will do, or I will do when we come forward and present the budget, is try to illustrate that. And to me, what you're doing is you're trying to show your efficiency and your value. And I think we can get there. I'm close to it right now. We're going back and doing some truth up work on that. But as far as a top line number, on a revenue basis, we can absolutely get population versus inflation, as well as no new revenue. No new revenue is a required part of the budget presentation. But just to keep us going, a lot of these priorities are going to be people-based, and people is your largest expense. A 1% raise simply in police and fire cost you $1.1 million. So you can scale up from there. I can give you the same for the city as a whole or the general fund. We've got all those numbers calculated. So, Mayor, I'll turn it back over to y'all and let you keep going. Good discussion.
Thank you for all that input. And again, all I'm looking for is a top line. Yes, I'm not, certainly not. I don't think anybody here is asking you to rework a whole budget. And we feel confident in your ability to do that. Any other discussion from anyone? Mr. Collins.
Thank you. I think in small business, large business, or even the business of government, and when you start looking at budgets, I think it's easy for you to focus on one side. We're going to cut expenses. We're going to cut expenses to make everything work. Or on the other side, and what we do in maybe in the small business world is we're going to raise revenue. We're going to find a way to raise revenue. We're going to raise revenue. And I think that we as a group are going to have to look at both sides of this to get a clear understanding of where we want to be at the end of the day. If we concentrate only on cutting expenses, then undoubtedly we can make the revenue side wherever we want it to be. It may not be the best result for our community as a whole. If we look solely at the revenue side, and we can raise taxes, we can figure out a way to bring in more revenue, whatever the case may be, that's certainly not going to be in the best interest of our community as a whole. But I think we've got to make sure that we're thinking both sides of the ledger to ensure that we get to a good point. If we focus only on one, in my mind, certainly there's going to be some parts of our community that doesn't find their needs met as they should have been. Thank you.
Dr. Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor. You just took the words right out of my mouth, Councilman Collins. I agree 100%. There is no doubt that we all want to be conservative with money. I hear that from everybody. But then I also hear, well, we want to make our police department and our fire department some of the most competitive in the state. We want to give all of our staff raises. We want to make sure that their salaries stay up with inflation. We want to protect everybody. We want roads. We want increased maintenance. We want this. Well, all of that comes with increased money. The cost is going to go up. And so I think it is unwise, even as a conservative, to say, I want to know new revenue rate every single year. There are great years when you can do that and keep a budget very lean, don't have a lot of capital, everything's good, inflation's low for that year. But I also think, I like the way Mr. Atkinson said it, is you're looking at where are we at with the cost of inflation? Where do we go to make some of these priorities happen? And you have to look at both sides of the ledger. You can't always just say, I want a no new revenue tax rate, which I support 100% if we can make it work. And that's what we're looking at. And it's a good thing because we all want to keep taxes low. Nobody wants high property taxes. No one. But that is how government works. To be able to provide these services, the money has to come from somewhere. And so when we have all of these asks, you have to look at that budget from both sides. So thank you, Mr. Collins. I appreciate you kind of making that point, as none of us just want to raise taxes and, buy fluffy quality of life projects when we don't have the money to do that. And so I say look at the budget as a whole, Mr. Atkinson, and look what we need for inflation. I don't want to cut police positions. I don't want to cut fire. I don't want to cut staff positions unless that is the right thing for that department. And I think that part-time project that we did worked out tremendously. And if that's what the department heads see is best for their department, and that's how we finance it, that's great. But to be able to elevate and provide all of these services, it costs money. I mean, that is the bottom line. It costs money. And so to make us great and to answer some of these priority calls, it may not be that we can get to a no new revenue tax rate. I mean, that's just how it is. And if that's okay and people want to cut police and fire and cut public safety, which is what our number one priority is, pretty much what I heard out of everybody's mouth, if you want to know new revenue rate every single year and you don't want police and you don't want fire and you don't want streets, then that's how you get that done. And that's how we fall behind all the time in every city across the state and across this country, is because we preach that, oh, got to get to this number. Well, we've got to get to what we have to provide core services. And without attacking people's budgets at home, but still provide good core services. That's what I have to say about tax rate.
Mayor Pro Tem Martinez Garcia.
And just to add that to that, we did try it a couple of years ago. And as I hear everyone talking about the future, we have to be very careful, because if we do that, we had so many deficiencies that we weren't able to fix all the things that we needed because we did that. And I'm not saying that, if y'all want that, okay, but just be prepared. Like Jennifer said, you better be prepared, because you are going to have to see, we need more roads. There's so many needs, but everything comes at a price, no doubt. And so is this the time? We definitely have to really discuss it, talk about it. But again, for me, I'm ready to see the budget. I know it's still being worked out, but one of the things that our citizens have also enjoyed is the low cost of living. So, as Jarrett goes back and I remember that little bar, and that was confusing, but we got to see where the city of Lubbock stands across the state. And I think that will be very interesting, to see if we make some cuts, additions, increases, this is where we stand. So I think that'll be great education for all of us on the dais, and I look forward to seeing that as well, Mr. Atkinson.
So I guess my comments in this discussion, and for those of you who are new on the council, you may not, I'm sure you probably are aware, but 2 years ago, for the first time in memory, we did vote for a no new revenue rate, 4-3. It wasn't unanimous, but it was 4-3. It was the 4 new people on the council versus the 4 people who'd been on the council for a while. That same year, we went to the citizens with a bond issue for our roads of $200 million, more than the bond issue the previous year that the voters rejected. But this time, they overwhelmingly approved it. I'm very conscious of how that works. I'm very conscious of how people's household budgets work and what they think about what the city is doing and what the city needs to do. Because when they have to cut into their budget and do without things, they have real questions about whether the city has made those same difficult choices that they have had to make. And that's what I'm very much aware of, and it's something I campaigned on to get elected. And so it's very important to me. These are not good times for most of our taxpayers and our citizens. They may be okay for those of us who sit up here. We may be able to make that tax payment, our mortgage payment with the tax in it, without any problem, without any adjustments to our lifestyle. But that is not the case with many of our citizens in the city. And so I'm very conscious of them, and I'm also conscious of how this thing works together with us bringing forward to our citizens a need that they all understand is a priority need, and that is roads. And we're going to be coming to them, asking them to vote on another road bond issue this year. And I think there's a connection between those two. They want to see discipline from us in the regular budget, and when we come to them for some special need like this that they recognize is a real need, they're more prone to vote for that and to support that. But if they see that we have not exercised all the same kind of discipline that they're having to use with their household budgets, they're more resistant and reluctant to approve those. I personally would like that road bond to pass. And so I'm very conscious of how that will operate, the synergy between those two things. The other thing I want to remind everybody of is last year, after having voted for a no new revenue rate, we voted, I didn't, but the rest of the council voted to raise taxes by 3.17%, almost the maximum that we could raise without having to go to the citizens. So our baseline this year is starting with that 3.17 increase that we had last year. So again, for me, I'm very reluctant to put an increase in taxes on our citizens this year, having done so last year almost to the maximum that we could have done without having to go to them, because I believe if we'd have gone to them for their approval, they would have rejected it if we had hit the 3.5% rate. So again, that's where I'm at. I know it's difficult, but that's what priorities are about. And I reject the presumption that if we don't do that, that the place that hit is going to fall in our budget is our public safety. That is not where that hit has to take place. That hit can be in lower priority issues. And so I reject the idea that if we don't do this, then we cannot do what is our biggest priorities, because that's what setting priorities is all about. So I want to be very clear about that and my position on that going forward. Anyone else?
I just have a question for
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have a quick question for our city manager. We did have to do the increase in tax last time because of the following year where we had all the cuts. Isn't that right? I mean, it's a little bit confusing, I think, for the public, so I just want you to clarify that when we do those cuts, then, and we can't fill all the needs, that's why we had to do the increase. Would you just explain it, please, for those watching?
Yes, ma'am, I'll try to do that. Any of the decisions that are made here are cumulative decisions. They do not exist in a vacuum. And so I'm just going to use inflation as the simplest example. And I'm trying to flip through last year's presentation. I hadn't quite got back to those examples. Here, they're coming up quick. We, the city, and the mayor makes a good point. People are making decisions on how to spend money.
Mm-hmm.
We're seeing sales tax, which is still good. It is still above budget. It is not near above budget as it has been in the past. Remember, that's your number one source of revenue, and you don't have a direct impact on that. You build an environment that impacts it, but you don't have a direct impact on that. We have eaten inflation. We did during that year. We did do some catch-up in the current budget year. The mayor's numbers are pretty good, pretty close. But you can only tighten that so far before what you're actually looking at is eliminating. So if that's a goal, then it would help me to know what you would look at, you know, to have to try to eliminate. But trying to find my road numbers, I think I'm really close on the ones that I gave you for that. You know, here's another one that we had last year that we demonstrated. A police patrol SUV has increased by 43.6% in the last 5 years. Fuel prices, I'm going to leave those out because they just jump up and down and up and down. As of last August, concrete to put on an arterial street has increased by 135% over 5 years. So concrete went from $96 a square yard on our projects to $227. Asphalt from $100.6 to $200, so roughly a 99% increase, in 5 years. We've been able to do that. We've continued to try to lean the budget out. Would just remind council, the decisions become cumulative. Can you, in a short period of time, do everything possible to lessen that burden? Absolutely. But once you've cut it, you can't continue to do that unless what you're actually talking about is eliminate.
Dr. Wilson.
Yeah, so I just kind of want to remind everybody, I also pulled up last year's budget presentation, and for the 0.003 cent increase that we added on last year because we had cut the year before, and the no new revenue rate from the year before was absolutely the right year to do it. We had the money, we had inflation covered, it was the right year to do it. We had ARPA funds that had covered a lot, but then again, you can't always lean in and we say, oh, cut something lower. We're not going to cut public safety. Well, who are you going to cut? Are we going to cut parks that we just said is our priority? Are we going to cut roads? I mean, what are we going to cut? So I want to remind everybody, from last year, the 0.003 increase went to $0.9 million for our police and fire to have a raise, 4% increase. $1 million for street maintenance. 6 new LPD positions at $1.2 million. The firefighters, the staff, Station 20, and the body-worn cameras by LPD. That is what the taxpayers' increase went to. 100% of the increase that we voted on last year went to public safety. It didn't go to having fluffy projects that, it went to public safety. So again, I will state, when it's a great year to do no new revenue tax rate and kind of keep our budget flat, and we can do that, that's okay. But then again, the very next year, we had to have a slight increase for our number one priority, which is public safety. I just wanted everybody to know what the numbers went to. Thank you.
Again, I would just simply say, yes, we did cover those in our budget last year, but cuts were not made in other areas. We gave all of our staff rather large raises at or above the inflation rate that many of our citizens did not get in this city. So directly to your question, Mr. Atkinson, where do you cut? It's in those areas we've not identified as the priorities today. And again, it is not our job to tell you where to do that. We don't get down to that level of granularity in a budget. But I think you are coming to us asking for a consensus from us today about what our priorities are and what you might have to do and where you might have to go to find those cuts if that's what you need to do. And let me be very clear to our citizens and our taxpayers. I used an example yesterday talking to these students who were here from the Mandela Foundation about how our government operates here. And I said, our city manager, Mr. Atkinson here, is more like the chief executive officer of our city. He makes decisions about the day-to-day operations. I said, our job as a city council is more like a board of directors, and I'm more like the chairman of the board. I have one vote like everybody else, and I sort of set the agenda for things as we discuss them. But we give policy direction to Mr. Atkinson, which is what he's looking for from us today as he finishes up this whole process of putting together a budget. But the difference between us and a board of directors for a corporation is that the shareholders in a corporation have voluntarily committed their money to that corporation in the expectation of getting a benefit, the benefit being an increase in the value of what they have given to that organization. The difference here is our citizens have not, in a real sense, voluntarily committed their money to us. It is taken from them by law, they have to give it to us. They do not have a choice about that. Some do it willingly. I do. I'm happy to pay my taxes. It doesn't change my quality of life. It does for my son and his wife and people they're both teachers. It does for those citizens. They have to make very tough choices about their budgets because we take that money from them under penalty of law. But when we get that money from them, they do expect a result for it. And so the policy questions we're tossing around here and priority questions are, what do they most expect from us? What is the highest expectation of our citizens from us? And what does not reach that level? And so if we're in still difficult times for our citizens, where do we go to find the cuts? And I've said before, and I say again, I'm not always going to be a no new revenue guy. I believe we're going to have better times in about a year or so. And that's when we start looking at our budget in a different light. But I still, again, the report this year, Bloomberg's report a week ago, 2 weeks ago, was what our citizens, the average household pays for having a home is at its highest level, including taxes and insurance. We cannot separate taxes from all the other burdens that our citizens have to pay. And it's not just our taxes, it's every other taxing entity in this county that falls on our taxpayers. And it's at its highest level since 1984. It consumes more than 38% of the average homeowner's budget. We are part of that burden that is being placed, and we cannot just wipe our hands of that and turn away from that. So I'm very conscious of that this year. I'm not saying we never look for the needs of our city, because I want the city to grow and I want it to be maintained. But we don't do that in a vacuum. We do it with an awareness of the conditions on the ground of our shareholders, who are our citizens and our taxpayers. Mr. Collins.
Thank you. Again, for new members of the council, and so my question is very theoretical. In what I've heard in the experience of these members that have been here, 2022, a no new revenue budget was adopted that essentially included a significant amount of cuts to the budget. Is that correct? Fairly close, and I'm asking, so this may be...
Well, Mr. Atkins can tell you how he was able to arrive at that. I recall it, but I may have forgotten a few things. But do you recall how you arrived at the no new revenue rate and what you did?
We eliminated a number of positions, largely in the Parks Department. Those we didn't put back. That's not the ones we traded for the full-timers. But we did do that. Very flat on capital to do that. Much smaller raise for that year. I think that was the year police and fire probably got a little bit larger raise than the rest of the team, which went back to an equal number the following year. Just pull everything back that you can.
And so, and then in following that, the very next year, we raised property taxes to within inches of the max to catch up. And so is there thought behind the notion of, hey, let's not do this yo-yo, seesaw. Let's leave our tax rate flat and allow for the revenue growth that has occurred and try to stay on an even keel and not have to go back and forth. And I'm asking the question of the group because I haven't been through one of these before, but it just seems to me like there's a little bit of creating your own conflict internally when you decide that we're going to make a cut, and then we got to go back and get all we can, and to do that, how are we appearing to our constituents? Oh, they had a maximum tax raise. Well, why did they have a maximum tax raise? Because they took a maximum tax cut. And so is there and again, I'm asking the question just for conversation, is there a thought process that says if we leave the tax rate alone and live with what that provides, and granted, there are pockets, large pockets of our community that look at that tax and it's very important to them and it does impact their daily budget. Are they better situated if they kind of have a knowledge that it's going to be evenly keeled, or this back and forth? How does that impact them? And so I guess I'm asking again, as a theory, is it not better to leave the rate alone and allow the revenue to do what it does, and allow us and the city manager to take that revenue and apply it as it's best applied? And that may still result in cuts to the expenditure side, or that may still result in less expenditures than they would have liked or they came to ask for. But it gives everything, an even platform where everybody really kind of knows what we're going to do.
Well, just in one point to how you're commenting, and I know you know the difference, but you cannot leave, if you just leave the rate the same because of the appraisal, which has shot up so much this year, your taxes will go way up. So I don't think you're really talking about leaving the tax rate the same. You're talking about a rate that would meet the needs of inflation and other things and bring in that income, but you're not really talking about, I mean, if we were to leave the rate the same this year with the way people's appraisals have gone up, their property taxes will go way up. So
what is that number, Mr. Atkinson? Do you know how much the average appraisal or the citywide appraisal rate has gone up?
Thank you.
Mr. Atkinson, yes, can you answer that question?
Average residential, and I'm guessing just a hair, we don't have the final numbers, but the average residential is going to come in really close to 10%. So to follow on the mayor, and again, my argument that the rate's not the point, it's the revenue. Maybe you're suggesting that you take year-over-year revenue plus that reasonable growth. And remember, in any and all cases, when we're talking about property tax revenue, the rate never comes into it until you do the equation backwards. You're limited to only increasing your revenue by 3.5%. Same property to same property, but 3.5% is that number.
So an important point that I think everyone here knows is that no one on this dais has anything to do with the appraisal.
That is correct.
No one in this building has anything to do with the appraisals.
Correct.
Okay, so, and I knew that, but I wanted to say that very loud and clear, that this body does not have anything to do or have any control over those appraisals. And so, to the point, are we talking about a rate? Are we talking about a revenue? And I'm talking about having things on with an even keel so that we as citizens and taxpayers can have some expectation of what we're going to do. I don't think that I want to see a great savings. We've all seen insurance rates rise this year, and okay, so I got to save a few bucks this year on an insurance policy that is going to cost me 5 times more next year because I got to save a few bucks this year. And so I think we find that we would look or hope to find a balance in how we manage those funds. We don't put ourselves in a bad position. We don't put ourselves in a fluffy position, as Dr. Wilson has used. We keep ourselves in a position that is even and balanced so that we can plan and project what we're going to do. We talk about today, and today is very, very important. But one of the things that I find in this list of priorities is the future. And the future is so very, very important as our city continues. We look at things like, I know, we're building a new fire station, but we are already in the process of determining where the next one is going to need to be. And so if we cut our budget to the bone this year, does it delay the possibility of putting in that fire station when it's needed? And I don't want to put it in there until the day it's needed. But I absolutely don't want to be caught short and say, oh, we can't build the next fire station, the next police substation. We can't afford to install this stop sign or red light or patch these potholes because we were trying to be short today. And so I want us to, and again, and I'm speaking very theoretically here, but I want us to understand, does this seesaw really work for us? And I'm asking because I don't know. I guess we'll get 3 or 4 years of experience to find out, and then I'll get voted out, and then I won't have to worry about it anymore. But thank you.
Well, Dr. Wilson, is your, okay, it's not showing up here. Dr. Wilson?
Got it. And I think what you were trying to allude to, Tim, was not like a flat rate, but let's keep the budget even. So we're not this yo-yo every year. And I think, Mr. Atkinson, I think that's what you were trying to ask earlier in a priority was, can we look at the budget plus what's inflation, right? Yeah, the population plus inflation. I mean, where are we at and where are the extra costs? Can we cut a little bit here and there, but not go where we're, yep, let's add a whole bunch of tax this year, let's cut a whole bunch, because we're just doing the yo-yo and then we're having to catch up. And I don't think it does any good, and I think it makes everybody confused. So I think the population plus inflation model of looking where we're at and what is the increased cost going to cost us. So, but I think that just alluded back to kind of what Mr. Atkinson was asking earlier on how to present that to everybody, because when we all just sit up here and talk about rate, it's a backwards calculation. It's just trying to figure out. And I know as a businessman, we all know that, like when we do business, but it's hard to understand, I think, from a taxpayer's perspective of they hear terms like no new revenue tax rate, and that sounds good to them because they think they're saving money, but then the very next year, they think, oh my God, what did they do? They raised all these taxes, and when, in effect, we are just trying to keep up, and we're doing the seesaw ourselves.
Thank you, Mr. Collins, for reminding our citizens that we don't set their appraisals. That can't be emphasized often enough, I don't think. We have nothing to do with that. So let me go back to you, Mr. Atkinson. In the year that we did set the no new revenue rate, again, we did give raises to our employees. Can you recall what the raise for our employees other than our police and fire was, and what our raise to our fire department and police department was?
I can't get back to that set of numbers. We did, actually we did it for 2 years in a row. What we did is a much larger raise for police and fire. And then for the remaining employees, what we did was an averaged number, but those were the years we turned it upside down.
Right.
So the farther you were down the pay scale, the greater your percentage. And then, of course, the higher you are on the pay scale, the smaller the percentage. And so I can get those numbers, I just cannot seem to get to them right here.
But you made the point I was wanting to make. One of the ways we helped arrive at that no new revenue rate was with that creative approach to giving raises. It's not that we didn't give anybody any raises during that year. We did give raises that year, and like you said, we had an inverse on our lower paid employees getting a bigger raise than our higher paid employees, which I thought was very much the appropriate thing to do, because oftentimes we have difficulty filling, and we've talked about the difficulty of filling those positions really where the rubber hits the road. You know, the guy who's picking up the trash, the guy who's taking care of the park, the guys who are out there maintaining the streets and the infrastructure. And so we've got to keep those positions filled. So we did it that way, but if I recall correctly, one of the other things, or two of the other things we did, you made some adjustments to our anticipated sales tax that year, how that would come in. And also, I believe you made some adjustments in our, what do we call it? Our reserves. I think you made some adjustments in our reserves. I can't recall if there were any other things that you did. And also, you didn't fill some positions that had not been filled.
We eliminated a number of the positions that had not been filled.
Yeah.
That was a year that we did have ARPA dollars that we were able to put towards like our CDL apprentice program, trying to get the vacancy rates down, which it helped. It really did.
But am I correct about the other adjustments that you made in that year?
The sales tax estimate for that year at the council's instruction was increased.
Yes. And then did we adjust our reserves to help get to that level, the no new revenue rate?
I don't believe that we did. So when I come to y'all with a budget, I am obligated to bring you a budget that best, in my opinion, best meets the needs of the city certainly in accordance with the council's guidelines, and the council is able to turn the budget I present into their budget. I have not, I don't believe in my career, brought forward a budget to use reserve money for ongoing expenses. And I would not do that. Council can certainly ultimately decide to do that, and I'll support it and move you forward. I won't bring you a budget that is taking an obligation you have incurred that is an ongoing obligation and pay for it with one-time money. I think that kind of gets dangerous. One thing about our reserve to remember, and I'm just in the general fund for now, one thing about that, we have policy level, we have a total number of reserves, total number of dollars. Then you have your required policy level. That's, we're not going to go below that line. And then I bring it, I'll show you this fund by fund every year, what we call excess reserves. So it's dollars over policy. The way we were able to increase street maintenance revenue is that is the first place from which those dollars come to do it. One-time money, because you can adjust street maintenance up or down the following year if you need to. We are building this budget with increased street maintenance. I have that in, but it's reserves. It's not the revenue that we're really talking about tonight.
And we did increase the street budget that year as well, right?
Slightly.
Okay, do you remember what the, was it the $1 million that we've been doing it? I think it was $1
It's
million.
either 500 or $1 million.
And then last year it was $1.5 million.
It was, and that was 1 million.
From the general
1 million
fund.
more from the general fund coming out through the reserve calculations, and it was $500,000 from Gateway.
Right.
And Gateway will not have money to contribute to street maintenance this year. The 500 for Gateway was additional money for inside the loop maintenance.
Right. Okay, any other questions? Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Mayor. I just have a question about when will we get our budget books? So when, I know you're still working on the budget, but can you give us an idea so we can be looking forward to
Hopefully
that?
not later than Friday, August the 2nd.
What,
Hopefully not later than Friday, August the 2nd. In fact, that's my commitment. You'll have it by then. You'll get it earlier if I can.
and just out of curiosity, Jared, how many years have you done budgets?
I've done budgets of this nature since approximately 1999. Budgets that kind of approach or meet this size since 2005.
Awesome. Well, I don't know about y'all, but I'm sleepy and I'm tired. But this was definitely enlightening because as, you know, I was hearing how we want to see all these quality of life projects and whatnot. It was also good to be reminded how we had to make cuts to staff and how, you know, you can't have one without the other. So, you know, but it's definitely interesting and I'm glad we got to collectively discuss it.